Well,
See
hello.
you guys.
Good to see you.
Hey,
Yeah. Okay, we are live. Let me see if I can pull up my little chat thing so I can ban the knuckleheads that jump on here and do my absolute level best to not curse this time.
I was gonna say, are we running bets this week? How long it takes, or
Yeah, I mean,
you shaving your hair or any Mohicans this week, or
I'm ready. I'm ready. Oh man, that's funny. Yep. All right, it's Windows there, and it'll be comments. Cool. So I think we are good. All kinds of. Let's see. So I'm seeing Bomber Crypto, interesting state of the network. We can discuss this video that I did with Soren. Yeah, we can for sure. And then we've got two moderators on this. We got both 619 OTA and Bomber Crypto, both volunteered to moderate after seeing me struggle last time with banning
nice?
that guy. So I thought that was super cool. So thank you guys. Let's yeah, let's start with what Dave. What's going on with the network, fella?
Well, who knows? um, it could be described as a little bit of a mess at the moment, I guess. I've not been big into it for the last week. Things are so up and down. But some highlights are activity's way down. The POC rate is way down. Obviously, there've been some issues with challenges going missing. So the team have played around with the POC rate, raising it and lowering it to try and restore things. At the moment, I think the last I looked about a couple of hours ago, we'd had 160,000 beacons in the last 24 hours, which is some way down on what it was pre Light Hotspots.
Yeah.
Obviously, the knock on from that is less beacons, less witnesses. So you'll get you'll appear to have less rewards, although you won't necessarily have less rewards. You'll have less events happening. The likely reason for less rewards is the fact that the number of HNT minted per day has been down pretty consistently since Light Hotspots. I think there was only one day that it was above target at 56,000 HNT, where it should be around 50. It's been down around 39, 40 for a couple of days now. So things are struggling somewhat. But as we all know, there is an algorithm in place that will hopefully average that out over a period of time. I can never remember the period over which it will average out, but it's something like 50 days or something. So things will improve. The only question that I've had that came to me a little bit earlier was around the change to validators now doing the challenging. The way the mechanism is that 0.9% was available for challenges, although this flexed depending on the amount of data transfer. So what was stipulated in the HIP in terms of whether that was 0.9 or whether it actually still fluctuates for the validators, which could see the validators getting up to 2.5%, I think.
Not anymore. It's fixed. It's fixed 0.9 now, so it doesn't flex. So that was changed after it moved.
Yeah, I've not checked. It was just something that came to me that I thought, hold on, maybe I need to look at that. Cool. One of the other good outcomes is that our retail's been down for a week or so, which has caused me much grief. But I was having to go through Twitter and update manually. But Amir noticed some of the stats that I was producing, and they've now been forked into the Explorer. So
yeah, you got a nice shout out. That was cool.
Some of the stats that we were tracking, like the number of hotspots rewarded per day, the number of beacons per day, number of witnesses per day, are now all available on the Explorer. And that's a live roll in 24 hours. When we get Helium stats back up and running, we will be having a log of those, so you don't just get the last 24 hours. You can look back in history and see how things have been progressing and do the weekly, monthly type reporting. So
right on. Thanks, Don.
But I think that the message is we're still got to hang tight. Things are still not ideal at the moment. Everybody knows that there's issues with flatlining. People are complaining, but it's not like everybody's sitting on their thumbs doing nothing. People are working to fix things.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get into that for sure. Because I see a bunch of howling about nobody doing anything, and I'm just like, oh man, you're not paying attention. But before we do that, I want to make sure we gave a welcome to Paul to Disc 91. Thanks for coming on, Paul.
Yeah, thank you to invite me. Happy to be
Yeah.
there with you.
Yeah, so tell me what's going on this is like a Euro heavy call. I got to be careful what I say here as an American. Tell me what's going on in
Yeah, careful.
France with Helium. Paul, what's going on in your world? What's going on with your ETL stuff? Because you're running your own OUI, you're doing all that. Like, tell me a little bit about how that's working for you.
Yeah, sure. I have a console that has been set up about a year ago now. So it
Yep.
was quite flat during months as the Helium console was free to use with unlimited access and so on. And that's interesting to see that since Helium changed the rules, now people are looking for a console, and so I see some people registering on a console. What I was really happy, I mean, it's not a question of money itself, but it means that currently some people are paying for with real dollar for getting DCs to use my console. So it's quite good to see that. I mean, there is a value created on this with people paying for connectivity,
Yeah.
which is interesting, even if my price is a bit higher than the DC price, because I mean there is a full document explaining the real cost of Helium. You can check on my website,
Yeah.
but basically one DC is not the right reference. So my point of view, it's really cool to see that some people, even if it's a dozen currently, but some people are ready to pay for using the LoRaWAN network. So it means that they have applications that make sense for them. It's
Yeah.
just not for doing some hacking. So that's
Yeah.
quite a good signal.
Oh, cool. So I mean, we're seeing with what you're doing, it sounds like we're seeing kind of the birth of the actual use of the network with sometimes
Yeah.
people who don't know or care that much about Helium. They just want their information to flow, which is, I mean, that's a great sign. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And when we talk about network revenue and so on, or blockchain revenue, there is a really important point around the use of the network. I mean, if we just build a network of gateway or hotspots, it does not make sense. But if we create something where devices are communicating, I mean, it's a long-term profitability, which
Yeah.
is exactly what we need to build.
Love it. It's super cool because a lot of us got into this just thinking like, okay, this just having a miner up is a great thing. I don't have to do anything once I get it up. But yeah, for the long term profitability to work, people like you got to have services like you've got. And man, Paul, I tried to follow the directions for the OUI, and I was just like, dude, I'm just gonna have to back off on this. I'm gonna have to come back and take another run at this in a month when I got more brain power. Because I got the OUI side, but running console and router was just, it was a bridge too far for me right now. it's not easy.
But in fact, yeah, it has been made really more simple, as now you can just run the stack of containers. So now it's really more simple. It's more a bit I'm afraid because you have to spend about $1,000 for getting started.
Yeah,
And you have to not mix your different account IDs or you lose everything. So it's more on that point that
yeah,
it's a bit sensitive, but not so much complex. And for some, I mean, if someone want to have one and a bit afraid, I also do a router as a service.
that's right. Yep.
So I host router for other companies or in a private environment. So it's also something I try to do.
Yeah, yeah. I dig it. I'm excited to take another run at it, but for now it's just like, oh man. There's a couple things that I wanted to hit in this one. I see a couple things in the comments about like when is this going to happen and is this rollback going to happen, and just setting that expectation is there's not going to be any rollback. We're only going to go forward, and this is just going to take a while to figure out. I look back on this, and I don't know where you guys sit on this, but I would have liked to see Helium when they started the transition to Light Hotspots have said, hey, we think this is going to take about a month. You should expect that there's going to be significant flux, and you'll have miners offline for up to 70% of this next month. And just setting that expectation, and then if they would have nailed it, totally fine. But if not, then everybody kind of knows what's coming down the pipe, because this is the second or third time we've had a giant change to the network. And
It's in the can.
What's that? Yeah, it's in the can. Yeah, and I think there's like, it's not that Helium isn't, or the Nova team isn't working hard. They're going, hammer and tongs at this thing, but it's just a giant, difficult, complex problem.
Well, it's like, look at it. I mean, they found a bug in HIP-17. How long's that been active?
Mm-hmm.
It was such a deep bug that they didn't realize it was an issue, and that's meant that rural area hotspots are not being targeted as much as city areas. City areas are staying more up to date, so they're more active for targeting. So they've released this variable that's being changed this week. But right now, if you're not in a city centre, you're going to be getting next to no traffic because there's no beacons happening in your area. So, but just the fact that this is HIP-17's been live for that long and they've had to go this far back to get it to go forward, it's tracing through every step of the code to make sure everything's perfect, and it's a change here and a change there, and eventually we get to the good state. But rolling back right now would mean that they'd have to undo everything they've done and not be able to test it in the real world.
Yep.
It's just pointless. Those bugs can't be found because they won't see them, so definitely move forward.
I've had a couple of messages about people complaining that they've had no activity for the last 48 hours or whatever. And to be honest, that could be perfectly normal because there are no beacons in their area. So there's nothing for them to witness. Because beacon counts are so much lower than they were before, they're not getting targeted to beacons. So yes, there's this other bug that's around that sees hotspots flatlining because process stops, but people have got to be patient, I guess, and really understand what's going on.
Yeah, one of the challenges is the disappearation of challenges. By the past, even a standalone miner has a transaction per day or something like this, and now it can be totally flat if you have no data and no witness. And it's for what I've seen on my miner, if for some you don't know if they are done or if they just have no witnesses, and that's make it a little bit more complex to
So if we consider there's 160,000 beacons a day, and pre-lights there were about 550,000 hotspots that were regularly active. That's one beacon every 4 days on average.
Right.
So from that we can quickly see that people are going to not receive anything for a while unless you're in a hugely densely populated area with great coverage, because there will be somebody around you that beacons. But if you're out in the sticks, then there's a lot less chance that you're going to see activity at the moment. And go on, AP. Just
I was just
dive
saying, I'm in the sticks. Yeah, I got a number that are flatlining myself. Like the only thing I can see is the data that I'm passing through them. So
yeah, that's another metric. So I've got some that are flatlining as well, but I can see the data, so I know they're up and doing something. But not everybody has the luxury of having data through them, which is why everybody should have a sensor, put it in the garden, and get it firing some data out.
I've made an open source project for this. Yeah, sorry. I made an open source project for this, which is a Helium Helium monitor, and basically check the internet connectivity and the LoRaWAN connectivity, and report this on a Wire terminal and on Watchum application. So it's something anyone can build for. About just the price of a Wire plus a E5 transceiver.
That's right, and you've got directions on how to do that. So if anyone Googles what is it, Helium monitor, I'll drop that in the chat. They can figure out how to do it, because you've been super good about showing people how to do this stuff.
Yeah, it's GitHub-anyone.com. It might be on the end of the project.
Yeah. It's been
it's the best way forward going forward to monitor your hotspots for sure. I mean, with Helium status, we were monitoring the peer-to-peer, but if the peer-to-peer goes away, the only true way to monitor your hotspots is have a device in the area and do all of this. We talked about this a few times in the past. Like, it's just a good idea to have a sensor that you can just check and make sure everything's all right. It's just the only thing you'll ever need to do is maybe, if you have a Wi-Fi plug, just reboot the thing. That's the only thing you should ever need to do, and very rarely, replace the SD card. But that's it. That's all we need to do going forward, and that's why the upgrade was so critical.
Yeah, It's super cool to see the whole thing. It's interesting to see the kind of outreach in the marketing side, but I think the Helium team, from my perspective, is like we're just going to fix the problem, and you guys figure out how do you want to talk about it. Which is funny. I see Dario ask, where is Soren? I think Soren's coming on. He said he's busy for 2 weeks, but then he'll come on after the third week. So he should be on here at some point. But after I talk to him at the end of that, I don't know if he said it on the show or not. He's like, yeah, I'll come on anytime and talk to you guys. So could be cool. I got a lot of negative feedback on that show, so I'm not sure how much more I want to delve into that. But let's see, Dave. There's a question in the chat about uneven distribution of beacons. I think you hit it, but are you seeing that? You see the question?
Yeah, I've not seen the question. Now I'm doing multiple things.
Sure.
I've not seen the question, but yeah, the distribution of beacons, again, it's down to low numbers, and as Neil said, we've got this HIP17 bug that is targeting some over others. We just need to ride it out. I've not done any great analysis on by area. I know last week we spoke briefly about looking at the beacons by area. Versus the population of hotspots in that area on a country basis, and basically it was across the board for both large areas such as countries and makers. So I've not seen anything that suggests that it's a particular country, but it may well be down to regions within a country where we've got densely populated areas.
Dig it. Yeah, it's like that. The general thing is like just hold fast, fast and be patient.
That bug's been fixed, isn't it? It's just they're waiting to activate it with the chain variable. So that happened this week. So it's not like they're still trying to find it. They know what it is. It's going to happen. Just needs a couple of days before we notice any difference.
Yeah, Neil, how come it's not happening right now? Like they're not activating that chain variable faster?
Because they need validators to have a mandatory update, and when they have a mandatory update, they have to serve them notice to give them time to do it. You know, the version went out on Friday. I don't think they alerted them until last night that it was a mandatory update. So just need to give them time, and then they turn it on. I mean, it could be very well that a certain percentage of the network's on the new version, and they might decide to do something if it's urgent. But generally, they'll give them time.
Cool. Thank you. There's like so much I don't know, and it's always nice to hear your perspective because you're super plugged into like the technical side and what's going on in the background. Let's see. I saw another question in the chat from Saad, and maybe that's a Paul question. The current state of the ETL, or Dave, either one of you guys. I said I'm seeing all the data queries coming back as February 22 latest. Can you guys give us some updates on the ETL resuming full operation? Are there any alternates to data statistics?
Is that the 𝐸𝐸𝐿?
I'm not sure which one he's talking about.
Yeah,
probably.
I guess it is, and there have been some changes to the way that the data is structured, which means that some queries won't come back. Something that I'm going to be struggling when we get our ETL back, because the data is now hidden in the transactions table rather than being in challenge receipts, for example, for looking at beacons and witnesses. So I'm going to have to restructure some of the queries to get data back, because I was running them the other day and I could get to May the 10th, and May the 11th it wasn't there anymore. I was like, what's going on? But yeah, I suspect that a similar thing has happened back on the 28th of February where a data structure has changed, so the query is no longer effective and it needs to be rewritten. I guess, Paul, do you have anything else on that?
Yeah, I didn't see a big data structure change in my ETL, but what we had in the previous week is there are some addition of column about the if it's first scene, last scene on some entries, and there is a huge computation to fulfill this column. And the query that was made for migrating the data was a loop in a loop in a loop in a loop with a complexity of 1.3 billion line, I think. And so at the end, it crashed my ETL, for example. And we had to apply some new some new indexes, and the indexes itself was 3,000 gigabytes more on the ETL. So it's a huge time to create this, and sometimes in my case, for example, I was running out of storage for so there's 300 gigabytes has been a problem. I had to make an upgrade for this. And what I mean by this is that any ETL change is no other big impact, because we have a 5.7 gigabytes PostgreSQL database, which is really really big, and so any impact on the structure can be taking hours and hours of computation, making ETL load during that time. So that's coming to be a really complex piece of code.
Yeah. So
Sounds
when we tried to run the upgrade, I think it took 4 days before we gave in and ran the index, and even then the index wasn't big, and then we ran into similar problems with storage. So we're, like you say, 5.8, 5.9 terabytes. You've got another 0.3 or 0.4 terabytes to go on top of that, and we only had, I think, 6.9, 6.8 terabytes total. So we've now gone up to, we've doubled that. So that when we come back, we've at least got some headroom. But with the number of hotspots and the number of rows that are created every day, it's not going to be too long before we run out again. It's kind of going up exponentially.
Yeah, that's a big issue. I mean, previously you were be able to find some hardware and includes that are compatible for such volume. Like on 𝐒𝐡𝐨𝐰, you had a good setup with I think it's 7 gigabytes storage available. But soon it's going to be too small, and so you have to rely on different storage. And if you have a network storage, the higher rate can be too small. So there is a certain complexity for the coming months on ETL. I made the choice to have my dedicated hardware to be able to scale, but it's not so easy to get currently. So there is a real difficulty in front of us for this, I think. And basically, I think it should be made on a. I mean, we should take a look at PostgreSQL clusters. There is some option for this, but I'm not sure if it will really work well. I start making a research on this, but there is a huge work on it. And basically, I think regarding the number of tables we have and so on, I think that's using something like MongoDB. I mean, so something we can cluster and we can easily scale would have been a better choice. If you take a look at the ETL data structure, I think you have 10 tables. I mean, just really the structure complexity is really small, in fact, but each of the tables are really, really big, and that's the issue.
Yeah. And there's duplication across the tables as well.
Yeah, I'll put it out here. There's 3 people nodding their heads, and I'm nodding as well, but I don't understand any of that. So I'm pretty sure that BFGNeil and AP and Dave, like, they're like, oh yeah, I totally get that. I'm just like, man, this is so complex. I am.
It's just a big beast, and it's hard to manage. And when things change, they can take days to update, and then in that time, people realize that you can create an index and make it take an hour, and then you have to restore, and then you have to run a huge restore on it, and it's just a bit unmanageable at this stage.
And then you have to sync.
What is important? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and then once you've done all that and done the upgrade, you're 10 days behind the blockchain, and you have to wait for it to sync, and it can take half as many days to sync as have passed. So if you're 10 days behind, you can expect 5 days to catch up, but during that 5 days things are moving on, so you end up at about 7 days to catch up from being 10 days behind. So it gives you some idea of the complexity and the computational power that you need to run an ETL and keep it maintained.
And what the important point to understand is that ETL is fulfilling the API, and without the API you lose a lot of service. Like an example, if you want to make a wallet to wallet transfer from the application, if you don't have the API running, you're stuck on this. So API is quite critical for many operation. I mean, all the application we are using for monitoring the hotspot, all the hardware provider application and so on, they're all using API and an ETL behind. So that's why it's quite critical to maintain the network.
AP, what do you got? I see
think
you
that-
like laughing and nodding your head. What's going on in your brain box?
I was just saying, I just run the baby one, like the tiny ETL, which only just stores the last 5,000-ish blocks. So, yeah, it's a lot
like
lightweight.
2-3 days?
Well, it
5,000.
grabs a snapshot, which makes it even quicker, and then it pulls it in, and then it presents it as an API to another script, a Python script, that then pulls it into the Postgres database. But it's only 5 gigs. It's not like terabytes like you guys.
It's crazy. It's an enormous amount of data. Hey, let's zoom out. I saw something from Steve Crabb about the role that validators play, and I think there's really cool pieces here on this show where you guys go super deep in the technical side, but there's also coming back out, and we have to remember that not everyone has been around Helium as long as we have, and I've seen in kind of the general forums, like there's this real fear of validators being this thing that are going to control the network and have ultimate control over the whole thing. So let's go through and kind of explain what they do and maybe what the job is that they're taking on and why it's not a threat to have validators on the network. And Neil, do you want to kind of kick that off? I think you'd probably be the best to start explaining that.
I could try. I mean, so the validators do block production. So there's a lot of them. There's about 3,500, I think, or close to those numbers. And between them, 43, or was it 45? I can't remember exactly, are selected at any one
43.
time to create the next block. Yeah, 43. Yeah, create the next block. So in that process, they validate transactions, and everything goes through, and then it puts it into the block and moves on to the next one. And each period is about 47 minutes, it's going to be. Or it never runs that quickly at the moment, but it's about that, what they should take. They then kick out a certain amount of the group and more are taken in. So that's their main role. They do all of the block production. What they've just had moved to them is challenge construction. So the part where instead of your hotspot challenging another hotspot on the network, the validator challenges the hotspot on the network. That only accounted for 0.9% of earnings. So it's a very, very small percentage of what goes out there for the whole network. So it's quite a critical job. But what it means is, because hotspots don't have to be in sync to challenge, they can stop following along with the chain. So it means they can become much more lightweight, lower CPU usage, less problems. And you have to remember, an out of sync hotspot can't deliver data because there's problems with it. It needs to be fully in sync to do anything. So we're going to have a much better uptime of the network, but it needed to move to that validators. Now, all of that was done on hotspots, but it was just a nightmare, right? We were halting all the time. We had stupidly long elections. It was going nowhere. And that was at like 20,000 hotspots, 25,000 hotspots. So it's just been a long process to get where we've got today, because they've had to go from moving the block production to validators, and then they can take the sync away from the hotspots and move the challenge construction to the validators. So it's this long process that's been going for like a year now, right?
Yeah. And what do you think? I mean, it's been a while to make this thing, and I don't think anyone expected this to be as successful as it was, as fast as it was. And I think that's probably the core of the current problems. As far as like implications for where like a base of power rests, I don't see that there's any big problem in shifting challenges over to validators. It's not like the network is substantially changing as far as who kind of controls it.
For anti-gaming reasons, it's actually better as well, because the problem with hotspots doing challenges is they can run their own firmware. So things like the deny list, they could just not include it, and then they can challenge whoever they like. There was a clever branch of the miner as well that meant that it would cycle through every challenge target it could until it found one of their own, and then it would challenge that one. So this is all happening on the hotspot point. And if you take it away from that hotspot point, put it on the validators, where you have to have 10,000 HNT to stake a validator, it's so much more secure, and it stops that problem from happening.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, you'd need control of the majority of those in the consensus as well, wouldn't you? So you're talking
To pull off a hack like that, you would have to be so massive. You would have to be exchange level budget to pull off a hack in any way. So it's just not. But right now, before this, anyone could have just opened up a hotspot and replaced the firmware.
Yeah.
You know,
Super good point. I hadn't realized that going to validators makes gaming even more difficult, but that's a really nice segue. One of the things that I heard a bunch after the Soren video is that, hey, what he's doing is this tiny little thing. Why isn't anyone going after these big gaming nets? And my answer is like, well, no, there are people doing it, but they're just not telling you how they're doing it all the time. And typically, from what I've seen, the more they talk about it, the less time they have to work, and the easier it is for the folks they're trying to stop to figure out what they're doing and to get around it. You guys are way more into this than I am. You have more understanding of it. Does that seem kind of correct, or does it look like from your side that no one is doing anything about gaming?
People are definitely doing stuff about gaming. People are definitely doing things about gaming. I think they don't want to go shouting about it, especially community members, because there's people that they've received death threats and all sorts from the bad actors as well. So they're just keeping on the down low as much as they can. And there's a few groups out there that are working together to get as much evidence as they can and raise GitHub issues on the Helium repo. And there's also a way that everyone can contribute as well through Crowdspot.io.
Yeah,
I think it's the name. And there's some really good information on there as well.
I had a question about that. I had a Gristle crew member put in, so he reported 10 hotspots and burned his DC. And he said when he checked a week later, none of those votes had gone through, and it said something like they were waiting to receive the DC. I didn't understand that, but I figured I'd ask you guys and see if you can help me understand it. Does that make sense, or is that just something that...
Yeah, I know that it was kind of really beta at the beginning, and they're still adding in new bits. Like I think last week there was a new feature in there.
Okay.
And that was how likely the placement of the hotspot was. So it might have been that it was really early days, but I think that's resolved now.
What also
Is it
need
on
to be
chain
taken
yet?
into...
It wasn't on chain yet, was it? At one point they didn't have it on chain. It wasn't, so you couldn't burn anything. It wouldn't register because it wasn't actually looking at it. But I'm not sure if it is yet.
Yeah, so this would have been, I don't know, a week ago, 10 days ago, something like that.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't actually submitted one on there myself. Yeah.
I pushed one, but I didn't check it. Paul, what were you saying?
One point to be noticed on that topic also is that the DCs are distributed to the hotspot when the state channel is closed. So on the Helium console, for example, the state channel duration is not so long. It's about a couple of hours. So within a day you get the DCs. But I mean, they can pay a lot of HNT or DCs for running the state channel on Helium. But when you go to another console, like another UI, the state channel are set up to be longer because the cost of opening a state channel is really high. And so it can be a week after. The parameter is something a week or 10 days or something like this. So you get the DCs for communication about 10 days after. You will get it, but it's longer. So sometimes people say, I don't get the DCs, but in fact, it just because the state channel stayed open.
Interesting. So let's kind of skim over that a little bit, just because that was something that I didn't understand. I still got to dig into, but there's this idea of these state channels being open, and the way that Helium has been running it up until they kind of switched the console over to a max of 10 devices was they were basically paying all of the back-end costs for anyone to run on console as many devices as they want. And then somewhere around, what was it, 2 months ago, a month ago, they said, hey, we're going to neck it down so that anyone using our free console is only going to get 10 sensors that they can put on. And then if other people want to run other consoles, like it's time for that bird to fly out of the nest. But it's not cheap to, as you say, to kind of, open and close state channels. And so over the course of time, if I'm understanding that correctly, that means that you could quote spend DC. It will go into the ledge. Like it'll definitely have happened, but you may not see that it has happened for up to 10 days. Am I getting that right, or is that missing something?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure to capture everything that had a network connection. But in fact, just to explain to anyone, in fact, when you are transferring packets, your hotspot is going to create a transaction on a chain to say, I have received a packet and I want to sell it. Okay, and this is received by a router that say, okay, I accept this packet and I'm ready to pay for this packet. This cannot be on the main chain because it's all the traffic, so it's really big and it needs to be taken really efficiently, really quickly because you have a certain timing for an acknowledgement or a downlink. So you cannot wait for 2 minutes to have a block where you accept stuff like this. So this is why there is an internal subchain which is named state channel, and it's another blockchain that is really fast and just managing this transaction. And so this blockchain has a start and an end, and at the end of this chain, basically the result is passed to the validator, and they credits the different DCs to the different hotspots that have realized the transaction previously in the state channel. And so the state channel are capped by two things. And at one of these two things, the state channel will be closed and the payment will be made. And so these two things are time, so a number of blocks, basically, as the time in the blockchain is expressed in blocks. And the other thing is the quantity of DCs. So basically, if you have a state channel with 10,000 KDCs, if you have 10,000 K transmission over this state channel, it will be automatically closed. Or if you don't have a lot of communication, it will be closed once the time will be terminated. So when you are a console manager and a UI manager, you set up this to optimize your running cost, because even if you have no communication and no device, you have to pay for the state channel, and it's quite expensive every time you terminate it. And so you go to a long period of time and a large amount of DCs. You cannot be too high in terms of amount of DCs because you have to lock this amount of DCs when you open the state channel to make sure that the payment will be possible. So there is a compromise you have to do. And so that means that if we have a 3 weeks or 2 weeks state channel direction, potentially the DCs will be paid after this period of time.
Dude, love it. So this morning I sat down and I wrote out, like, I'm designing my life. I'm going to write down all the things that I like to do. And one of the things I'm going to add is having Paul explain what goes on the blockchain. That was awesome. I know that many of you may not have caught all of that. That is totally worth going back and listening to again at the end, because that explains state channels.
And again.
Yeah, maybe twice.
Yeah, and again.
But it's taken, and I'll say it's taken me a while to kind of wrap my head around state channels. I'm at the place where I could understand what Paul was saying, and it also, like, it reminded me of things I'd forgotten. But that was awesome. Thanks, dude. That was really cool. Okay, so that explains for me why those DCs don't get burnt right away, or those don't show up right away. But to go back to AP's point, like crowdspot.io, that's the easiest way to contribute to the anti-gaming efforts.
Yeah, I would say with Crowdspot, it's one hotspot, one vote. So if there's like a cluster, it can be a little bit more difficult to vote for all of them. So you've got to go to all of them in the cluster and vote. But I think when you, might be wrong about this, but when you first sign up, I think it gives you like 20 votes or something like that. And then you use, so then you don't, it's not just, sign up and you've got one vote. Yeah. You got multiple.
Yeah. I mean, I figure, like, it's so cheap to vote with DCs. It's fine. It costs, it's not very much. So dig it. I'm seeing some cool stuff in the chat from Judge V. I like the messages. And then this tech services question: will discovery mode ever come back? I have no idea. What do you guys think?
I spoke to
𝗂𝐴 a couple of a week or so ago, and he said it's definitely something that they'd like to work on. But I think the consensus was it will be down to vendors to include a discovery mode when they become responsible for their apps.
Just to explain a bit how discovery modes works. In fact, the hotspot becomes a device, and so the hotspot need to have the credential like a device, so a dev UI, app UI, and so on. And it means that basically it has to be declared in a router, so in a console basically, and you have a cost every time you create a device. Plus, it sends one message every 30 seconds during 5 minutes every time you do a discovery. So, which means you also have DC cost when you do a discovery. So basically, the discovery mode, when you have 1 million of hotspots, is really costing a lot. So, in my point of view, it's why it's not sustainable for Helium itself.
Yeah.
So I mean, any hardware provider can do that, but it's gonna have a cost. And as you don't pay for a fee for every month running your hotspots, at the end the economic equilibrium is not there. So it's better basically to do it with a device like the tech service says 𝐒𝐻𝑖 is doing things like this, and I plan to have some interesting feature around this capability on the 𝐒𝐻𝑖 soon.
Now, one thing I disagree with is I think it would be the most valuable anti-gaming tool if every hotspot was once a week challenged to do a discovery mode to prove what was in their area, because you would find out very quickly what was legitimate and what was not legitimate.
Can't that happen
you
with
would get a
beacons
very
or no?
good picture. Not so much, I don't think. I think it's much better to do it in the controlled environment where you fire off discovery mode and you find all 400 hotspots that you can connect to, rather than just the 14 that you're limited to.
But
so it gives a much wider picture.
But those 400 hotspots are still reporting that they heard it. It's just that only 14 are randomly picked, right? So you should be able to still pull that data. Or am I not understanding it right?
As far as I understand that those 386, there we go, quick maths, are not stored on the blockchain.
Okay.
So only the 14 successful witnesses are stored. So if you've got a hotspot that can see 400 people in the area, you've got a pretty good indication that those 400 are actually there. When you've got 14 that appear and it's always the same 14, you've got to do a bit more analysis to work out actually they're in somebody's basement. But if you get the picture of every hotspot that's connected to every hotspot by firing off discovery mode, I think you could make a big effort towards targeting some of these gamers on a larger scale. Yes, it's expensive, but
I think I don't know. I think the data might already be there, because if you go into crowdspot.io, in the witness graph, you can see the main cluster. So like in my area, I can see my main cluster all connecting to each other. And I can see at the moment, there's no segregated like clusters of hotspots. But if you go to an area that you suspect there might be a cluster hidden within, you can see that they've kind of walled themselves off from the rest of the cluster. So that kind of data is, I think, already available, but it's a snapshot in time. It doesn't give you instant results, and it takes a while to build a picture up. Maybe we got it already, I don't know.
Yeah, I just think it would be a useful tool, personally, to every now and again just fire it off and go, right, this is what the picture looks like, and these are all the interconnecting graphs. I'm not sure how Crowdspot builds its picture. I suspect it still only builds its picture using those 14 witnesses, and you may get much better resolution.
You are right. Yeah, there would be better resolution, and obviously the less that we're beaconing at the moment and the less witnessing that we're doing at the moment, it also plays a factor into the picture. what we'd see over the next few weeks as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's super interesting to see. I mean, it seems like you might as well just buy a little device and go around firing off mapping packets, and kind of that would go back to the core kind of decentralizing effort on the network. Although I've got this whole post on like what decentralization means. What's that?
That's effort. I have to get myself a device and go out and walk around or drive around.
This is a true fact. Some effort required.
I think Paul mentioned earlier in our chat that you don't get anything for nothing.
Yeah, I did. That wasn't true for about 7 months in 2021, but the rest of my life that has been true. Yeah, that was a wild run. I'm just looking through the chats and seeing. I think 619 OTA and Kevin. So Balmer Crypto. Thanks guys for regulating in the chat. That is super awesome of you. 619 OTA is the #1 Helium memer. So
100%.
Yeah, if you're looking for Helium, look to him. And I saw something like, I think it was a joke just about Light Validators, because he's always joking. I don't see how that's gonna work. Anything else in here that you guys see? So I just want to make sure I don't miss anything in the chat this time. I see how you guys are talking.
Just going back on the security thing and dealing with gamers, there is so much effort going on in the background. It's just a lot of it is defining how to find it, what metrics are good, what metrics are bad, and then ultimately how to deal with this in a way that doesn't need human interaction. Because that's the slow bit here. Not only is the GitHub's thing being filled up with issues that are just people saying, please remove my hotspot, and then taking a picture of it with the plug not plugged in. There's thousands of those, and there's spam going on like crazy, and then someone has to manually sign it. We need to move to an automatic way of doing it, and that work's just taking a while, but it's getting so much better all the time.
Yeah,
there's a lot happening.
I think if people want to peek into some of the work, the POC swag working committee is the videos are recorded and they're on the DY or the foundation's Vimeo, I think it is.
Okay.
Somewhere. Yeah, and there's some sneaky peeks into that there as well.
Okay, and just to see the work, I think there's at least one Discord channel I've seen where they're talking about it. But the stuff that I've seen talked about is kind of AP. The points that you had brought up is people are getting death threats. People are getting threatened. Like if you think about this, if I think about this, if I'm like an anti-gaming guy, especially in the early parts especially in the early parts of Helium, I was working for free, and I was working because it was a fun thing to do to smash people who are trying to cheat. But at this point, like the stakes are getting bigger, the cheaters are getting more aggressive, and it's not super fun to be working for free and have someone call you and be like, hey, I'm gonna come by your house and slit your wife's neck. Like, no one wants to keep doing anti-gaming work when that happens. And so we've got to think about how do we incentivize the anti-gaming as much as the gaming is incentivized, because if that balance doesn't happen, the gamers win.
I think we need to get to automated methods as much as possible, where there's less human involvement at all. There's been some ideas floated about, just very ideas at the moment, like how we've got price oracles at the moment, where data can be put on chain for different metrics. As an example, say there's a certain metric for a cluster, and you can use mathematical models for that. And if those oracles are put onto the chain, you can layer them with different metrics and come to like a score or maybe a rating of some sort. That then gets applied against the hotspot, and try and get the human involvement out as much as possible would be the best thing. But it's stepping stones.
Yeah, baby steps. And it's still like, the thing is so new is that the expectation I see from kind of the general Helium public is that Helium is just as polished and mature as Amazon. And I want my money back, or I want my, free shipping, or I want like all these things that Amazon has had 20 or 30 years, whatever it is, to perfect. Helium's had a year and a half. It's grown way faster, and it's done it in this totally decentralized way. Like, you're riding a different animal. This is not like a nice horse that is built for you to ride. you're riding. I got my no cursing up. You're riding an effing like wild tiger with wings and flames coming out its mouth, and it like doesn't care if you live or die or get bucked off or not. Like it is going to the, well, not to the moon, but like it's going to like separate galaxies. Like it's such a different animal than anything that most of us are used to with these centralized services. And so as we go through, like, why isn't this happening? Why isn't that happening? It's like the horse isn't doing what you want when you kick its flanks because you're not riding a horse. That's what's going on. So, my little rant. I'm glad
Well
I got
said.
my Post-it note. Yeah. I've seen stuff about validators not updating. I think that why are only 50% of validators updated the software release 1.11.00? Yeah, I think.
Basically, you could imagine to have penalties in such situation. I mean, the role of the validator is quite important, and we've seen that the fact that they were not up to date make it a mess during the transition, and I consider that they could be penalized or they could have penalties for being late on version. It's a heap to propose, maybe.
Yeah. Neil, I'm gonna hit you on that in a second because I know you're kind of nodding, and I see that 609's got a question for you. But this raises up a really important point: is when Paul said it's a hip to propose. There's not like a central structure that says like, hey, this is the next thing to do, other than keeping the Helium network kind of alive. It's up to us as the community to write those hips. It's up to one of you, and I'll help anyone with kind of the writing side of it, but I can't do anything on the technical side. But it's up to us to write those hips, to propose those improvements, and then to go through and push them through until it makes it easy for Helium to execute it. It's on us. Like that's the responsibility of keeping the network healthy. So. Yeah.
So there's an SLA at the moment, isn't there, for validators to update? Is it something like two weeks they've currently got?
So SLA
I think
is service level agreement, Dave. So just we're kind of defining this stuff, and that's really typical in bigger business where two businesses will talk to each other and they'll say, hey, this is what I'm going to guarantee in return for you paying this amount of money. It's not something that most of us are super familiar with.
Yeah, so I think vendors generally get a week to update their firmware based on major releases. I think validators 2 weeks. I think given the importance of validators and how things have moved, then perhaps that needs to change. Perhaps 2 weeks is too much grace to give validators, given that they provide such an important function.
Yeah. Neil, what do you got, dog?
He's got a dog.
I see you got the canine alert system in the background.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
I really can't talk at the moment. He's got a bit nuts, but they need to be given time to upgrade, and they only put it out on Friday. So
yeah. So let me ask you this, just as a bystander: is what is a reasonable amount of time that you think we should give validators to update? Should it be like 24 hours? Should it be 2 weeks? Like what is totally reasonable?
I think it depends on the criticality, really, but of the problem. Because if it's just a general update and it can wait 2 weeks, why not 2 weeks? But then I don't know how the scoring, or if you were to penalize someone, you probably want to put a defined period of time rather than having different periods of time for different events. I don't know. Rattling off my head.
I agree. It depends, and also it does not mean that the validator is going really out of the blockchain. If it does not respect the timing, it just can reduce the rewards or something like this, just to create the incentive. Because in other hand, if we are too short, it could be dangerous, like pushing an update on Friday evening. And making a lot of validator out of the chain to take control on the other one you manage and you can apply. So if you really want to be in a decentralized way, you must have the validator working and not being blocked by a technical aspects. So a reduction, I think, can be a sufficient incentive to push people to maintain the validator. And not a risk in terms of security and the blockchain. So can be interesting.
Interesting. Paul, what you're saying is like the time period is not as important, but if they don't update within whatever 24 or 48 or 96 hours, like they start reducing the amount they're going to earn, basically. Is that the proposal generally?
Yeah, I mean that's the idea. Yeah, that's my proposal.
Love it.
Another idea that I heard was something of like a poison vase. So say there's an issue, and you know there's an issue with a set subset of validators because they haven't updated and they're causing problems. The idea is that the team could push out, or the community could push out a poison var, which would basically kill those validators until they update, if they're causing a problem. And I know Solana does it.
The question of kill the planet. I like the question of kill the planet. You say how long do vendor have to update a must-have update? But in fact, vendor is a big difference for me between vendor and validator. Is that vendors, they have a name, and if they don't update on time, they will get a lot of message with a lot of people not happy for having this update. So it's going to be a mess for them. So they have to push the update. But validator, I mean, a validator is updated. You don't know who is behind the validator. So you can just expect it to have it updated, but you have no one to blame. So they can take their time.
So it's got to be more programmatic. It's just like, if you haven't updated, you start reducing rewards, or as AP said, you start getting like, you don't get to participate until you update. So you got whatever 48 hours or whatever the time period is. I mean, it seems like it makes sense, but again, that's like some technical thing that would take me 30 years to figure out. So we got to hope that some rad engineer comes along and says, well, this is how it should work, and I'll write it, and then here's what I need help with. So that's,
Could you imagine? I mean, in a blockchain like 𝗪𝗫, you had some health monitoring on the different actors, and you are rewarded if your health is correct. So we could also imagine such mechanism where some validator are managing, are monitoring the health of the other validator with a penalty if the health is not good, or the response time is not good, or the version is not good.
Yeah, love it.
I think it's really important now as well. Previously, we talked that at any one time only 43 validators were doing anything in validating the blocks. But now we're expecting that all validators are doing something all of the time, because they each have a set of hotspots that they have challenges to issue. So every hotspot needs to be active all of the time. Not like we can choose 43 from 3,000. All 3,000 need to be running to make sure that every hotspot is serviced.
Okay. So I think, I mean, there's either it's us or someone else does like a whole thing on validators, because I mean, this stuff is still unclear to me. I've got like a very general picture, but I think there's enough information out there that could be really useful to people to understand both what the status is and what the kind of potential pathways are, because it sounds like it's not totally fully sorted out yet, like how the whole thing is going to work in the long run. So super.
The question of Thad is also quite interesting.
Yeah.
He asked why the validator can't receive over the air update.
Yep.
And basically, it's just not possible, because if we do that, it means that there is a centralization. Someone push a code to all the validator, and the validator are controlling the reward. So basically, if you have an OTA, you can attack the central repository, push a corrupted version of the validator into them, and potentially create a transaction inside to get all the HNT and give them to one defined wallet. So it's really important that every validator decide to push the code. That way, each validator can make sure that the source of the code is valid. And I think it's by design. We should not have a central, an OTA update for validator. It's better like this.
Yeah. Love it. Well, I totally
agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I'm on satellite, so it's a little bit laggy.
Now you nail it. No, I think we're at 10 o'clock, so we'll wrap it up. For folks who want to get more, this show is not the only place you should be getting your Helium information. Is jump on the Helium Discord and jump into any of those channels where you can either watch the Helium/Nova team working on it, or you can contribute to yourself. There's plenty of channels in there. Look on the left side, jump in, see what's going on. None of this stuff, as far as I know, is any kind of secret. It's all kind of open. We're all contributing where we can to what we can. So this is just the beginning, is where I'd start it. So ripping, guys. Anything else that you want to hit before we sign off? We're here in the last 30 seconds. No?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, cool. Thank you guys for coming on. Paul, super good to see you. Super looking forward to having you come on, back on. And we will get, I think, a couple more folks coming on in the next few weeks for new State of the Network shows. But rock on. Have a great week. And thanks to everybody for showing up and asking great questions.
All right,
guys.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.